This video is brought to you by HelloFresh. So stop pursuing a lost cause with those hot dogs, my dude. If you want good eats delivered straight to your door, get HelloFresh instead. All the ingredients you need to make some delicious meals are in this big old box complete with easy to follow instructions and portioned just right to make sure nothing goes to waste. With summer just about over and with holidays quickly approaching, now's a good time to save time and money with your typical dinner routine. And HelloFresh has you covered with a variety of menu options to fit your needs and tastes, with an ever-changing menu of 50 recipes to choose from every week. Maybe you want something quick and easy, family-friendly, or fit and wholesome if you're watching the weight. Personally, I recommend one of their many protein bowls. These are always my go-to meals because they're a cinch to make, they're better than the sum of their parts, and they take no time at all to cook, which is important for me because I need all the time I can get to make videos this large, though I've never had to pat down sweet corn before, but oh my goodness, this came out so good. And whatever I don't use, I can just store in the fridge and save for later. Maybe I'll try their new breakfast bites next time. Speaking of breakfast, here's a deal for you in the description box below. For free breakfast for life, go to HelloFresh.com and use code FREESCMJ. You get one free breakfast item per box while your subscription is active. That's free breakfast for life at HelloFresh.com with code FREESCMJ. So what are you waiting for? More hot dogs? Get out of here. Go get some good eats because we got a beefer of a video for today. Now let's continue on with the show. Alright, no more distractions, no more fooling around. I am back with the Final Fantasy series. This is one I've been sort of dreading the most because this is the Final Fantasy I have picked up and put down more than any other game in the series I've played across the 2 decades. That sounds strange for me, yeah? It's the next Final Fantasy after the critically acclaimed Final Fantasy VII, a game I hold near and dear to my heart as both a fan of RPGs and a fan of Final Fantasy. The game that propelled Square to new heights and success. You tuned into your TV during the late 90s and you saw commercials all over the place for this game. And this other one, this was it. This was the next big thing from Squaresoft. It's got combat, explosions, dancing, and most of all, a love story. Hell yeah, I couldn't wait. And it just so happens that Brave Fencer Musashi has a demo for it too. Ooh, even Pizza Hut getting in on the demo action. I wonder if they still sell the New Yorker. Actually, don't answer that, I don't really care. Pizza Hut is mid as shit anyway. I only speak from the heart. So Square went right to work on Final Fantasy VIII during the English localization of Final Fantasy VII, and all the major figureheads were back on the saddle after little to no time. Yoshinori Kitase was back as director, Hironobu Sakaguchi once again executive producer, although around this time he was more occupied with creating Final Fantasy The Spirits Within for theaters, and oof. Hiroyuki Ito, creator of the active time battle system from 4 and co-director of 6, was back to help build the battle system of this game. And Kazushige Nojima, event planner for 7, was back as a scenario writer for this game. Final Fantasy VII, to reiterate, was a huge deal worldwide, and with this upcoming title being the first Final Fantasy to be released in a post-7 climate, of course the plan was to make this next game larger than life. It was 4 discs on the PlayStation 1, commercials were everywhere, products were everywhere. Final Fantasy was now an event. Square was more confident than ever that this was their blockbuster franchise. Shit, you can see that newfound confidence as soon as the opening FMV. The more realistic graphics just slam you in the face, the animations were more grounded. Oh my god, the music is so dramatic and theatrical. It's right out of a soap opera. Nobuo Uematsu really struck gold with 7's soundtrack, particularly with One-Winged Angel, Sephiroth's final theme. So for Final Fantasy VIII, I think he tried to capture lightning in a bottle twice. He made Liberi Fatale, which kind of tries to do the One-Winged Angel thing again, but if you ask me, it doesn't hit the same chords, and I don't find it nearly as memorable or striking. However, we also just straight up have a vocal theme for this game, the first Final Fantasy to have one if I'm not mistaken, and that's Eyes on Me, and that I do enjoy, but I'll get more into that when I talk about the soundtrack proper. Either way, Final Fantasy VIII proved to be another smash hit for Square. Hell, until Final Fantasy XIII for the PS3, this was the fastest selling game in the series, likely because a lot of newcomers that started with 7 were excited for the next entry, and were probably disappointed when they discovered that it wasn't a direct sequel to 7, to which I say, hey, welcome to Final Fantasy. Indeed, while critically Final Fantasy VIII was very well received, fan reception to 8 wasn't as strong, but a lot of folks still enjoyed it from what I could tell. They just didn't like it as much as 7. To continue where I was getting at in the Brave Fencer Musashi video, which by the way, thank you guys for letting me indulge in that. I wanted to cover that game for years, and I figured looking at it before tackling this game was the most appropriate. And I've heard from a few of you that you picked it up and found some enjoyment in it, and that right there, that's the point of this channel. Besides making money. Oh boy. If you recall, I said the demo of Final Fantasy VIII didn't convince me, and that would cause me to skip 8 when it was originally released, but I couldn't exactly recall why. So to get some clarity, I loaded up that old demo before playing the actual game for this video, just to see if I could jog my memory, and holy shit, it all came flooding back to me. This demo is awful. It's placed during the fight at Dalit, where you had to get to the communication tower, but I remember getting bored because of all the downtime between battles as you and the others were simply waiting for something to happen. You couldn't access the menu, so healing and such had to be done mid-battle. There was a limit to the number of spells you had, and if you wanted more, you had to use this draw command to suck the spells out of enemies. You could summon Leviathan, but there was a charge time. Not to mention, holy fuck, the wombo combo of the Biggs and Wedge fight, the demon dude that immediately spawns afterwards that has too much damn HP, and then there's the fucking spider robot chase. This demo was exhausting, giving me the completely wrong idea of what Final Fantasy VIII was going to be in hindsight. So yeah, I skipped it initially until a few years later, sometime during high school, I finally tried the full release. Around this time, I already sank my teeth into Final Fantasy IX, which I loved, and the latest game, Final Fantasy X, the first PS2 entry, was already out, which I also enjoyed immensely. I figured it was only right that I go back to the one I skipped, but fuck, I just wasn't clicking with it. It felt slow, it felt weird. Where was the MP? Could I only get new spells by using these draw points or by drawing them from enemies? Where was the equipment? What the hell was junctioning? Why was I getting money just by walking around? And for years, I would try and go back to see if there was something I was missing, and clearly there was, but every time it ended the same. I would not get what the game was asking for me, and eventually I would just get bored and move on or replay another Final Fantasy that I know I would enjoy. And it was those memories I was holding on to as I got ready to bunker down and actually play the game to completion this time. And not just because I was making a video for it, but also because, who knows, it might be different this time. The last time I genuinely tried to play this game was over 15 years ago, and I'd like to think my tastes have greatly expanded since then. Fuck the fact that one of my favorite games of all time is an MMO, I think is testament to that. I'm older, I'm more mature, I think I'm wiser. Maybe I'll finally get it this time. But did I? Well, let's start with that plot summary and find out. In the world of Final Fantasy VIII, women potentially have the power to become sorceresses and wield magic naturally without the need to use guardian forces, magical entities that are the equivalent of standard Final Fantasy summons. They're also capable of transferring their powers to other women if they wanted to, to pass on their legacy, mind control them, and all that jazz. Most of the time, from what I understand, sorceresses are just your average humans living their lives like anyone else. But occasionally, a sorceress may grow mad with power, such as Sorceress Adele, who about 17 years prior to the beginning of this game, tried to take over the world with her massive powers. Her plan was to use this crystal pillar located inside this massive mobile fortress known as Lunatic Pandora to initiate a lunar cry, a catastrophic event where an endless swarm of monsters from the moon spill onto the planet like spaghetti sauce, causing untold chaos and destruction. However, her plans would end up in smoke as she would be sealed inside a stasis field and sent to outer space thanks to the combined forces of the Galbadian army and the forces of Estar, a super technologically advanced metropolis that frankly had enough of her shit. As a result of Adele's shenanigans, 3 military academies known as Gardens were constructed in the Balam, Galbadia, and Trabia continents for the purpose of training today's youth in becoming members of SEED. I think it's pronounced SEED because, Gardens and whatnot, but maybe it's pronounced CD because the game is on a CD. I love reaching. Anyway, members of SEED, instructed by Headmaster Sid, are essentially mercenaries that are tasked with dealing with missions across the world. Most prominently, they're meant to deal with sorceresses, and our story begins with our 17-year-old main protagonist, Squall.
That's Leon.
Yeah, whatever, Squall. Getting ready to take his SEED exam and graduate to become a member of SEED, a process which involves brutal training sessions with his fellow student Cypher, an asshole, reading a shitload of tutorial prompts that never seem to end, taking a trip to a fire cavern along with his instructor Keistis where they recruit Ifrit, the magical fire satan, to their cause, and finally with fellow students Zell, martial artist extraordinaire and God's least favorite child, and Selphie, transfer student from the Trabia Garden who, if given the chance, will probably fuck the first locomotive she sees, proceeds in helping the Duchy of Dalit from getting seized by the Galbadian army, a large military military force led by President Vinzer Delling that wants to spread his conquest worldwide. The Galbadian army wants to reactivate Dalet's giant communication tower so that they can broadcast messages across the globe again. Apparently, when Sorceress Adele was sent into space, a result of this was worldwide radio interference that made basic communication really difficult, if not outright impossible. Magic? President Delling hopes to use the communication tower to announce to the world that he selected a sorceress as Galbadia's new ambassador, in hopes of causing a great deal of unease across the continents and thus making them easier to conquer. And indeed, things do get uneasy for everyone, but unfortunately for the president, the sorceress known as Adia has plans of her own, immediately assassinating the president during her inauguration, spreading chaos across the city and gaining control of the Galbadian army. Though Squall and the gang attempt to assassinate her before things get out of hand, they fuck up and Squall gets impaled with icicles, but he gets better. Using her newfound army at her disposal, Adia attempts to destroy the gardens using a powerful missile base, but Squall and the others manage to somewhat thwart this plan, destroying the missile base before it can cause any more damage. I say any more because unfortunately Trabia Garden is wiped off the face of the planet before the missile base was properly dealt with, and sorry Selphie, we tried. Balam Garden is spared from the sudden case of missiles thanks to Squall managing to warn the students and staff about the incoming attack, and with a little elbow grease in defeating the secret financer of the garden known as Norg, who's introduced and written off in a speed I thought not possible. The Balam Garden's secret function is revealed. It's a mobile military academy. Yeah, the whole fucking building is an airship. And thus the Balam Garden is spared a grisly fate just by slightly moving out of the way, and Headmaster Sid reveals that Sorceress Adia is his wife. And not knowing how to handle that ongoing situation, he decides to make Squall the new leader and commander of Seed, who, may I remind the audience, is 17 years old. Though Squall reacts to the news of the Sutton promotion about as well as he'd expect an emotionally repressed teenager to take it, there's little time for reflection as Sorceress Adia decides to attack the garden directly using the students from the Galbadian garden, resulting in a huge skirmish complete with Squall punching the shit out of a soldier in front of a full motion video. The invasion culminates with a direct confrontation of the sorceress, who the gang managed to defeat with the power of anime, but it turns out Sorceress Adia was being controlled this entire time by someone named Ultimecia, who was revealed to be a powerful sorceress from the future that wants to achieve time compression, where past, present, and future are condensed into a single moment, essentially wiping out all of existence. To achieve this, she wants to possess and tap into the power of this girl here named, I assume it's Eleni. And okay, I can finally bring these other guys into the summary. Earlier in the adventure, Squall and the others suddenly find themselves with a sudden case of the EP and fall unconscious, only to then wake up as passengers to the lives of Laguna and his buddies Kyros and Ward, all soldiers of the Galbadian army. And Laguna, one of the biggest goofballs of the series we've seen so far. He ain't all sunshine and rainbows, but he's always trying to look on the bright side. He's terrible at talking with girls and tries too hard to look like he's in total control of the situation. He's very endearing though, and clearly cares about his comrades and family, Eleni being someone he's cared for since she was a child. At first, you're meant to think that these events are running parallel to your adventures, but after enough time, you begin to realize that timelines aren't adding up and shit is happening too fast. It turns out Eleni has a special power to send a person's consciousness to the past and witness past events. Her reasoning for doing this with Squall is to try and make amends by trying to change the past and witness a life she couldn't be a part of, since as a child, Eleni was hunted down by Sorceress Adele for her special power, but with her always on the move from Estar's forces and with Laguna constantly on her trail to save her, he would end up missing the birth of his kid and the death of his wife Rain, with Eleni feeling nothing but regret over that. But as she later finds out and admits, her powers don't allow her to change the past, just witness it. And while distraught over that, she's also grateful to see that Laguna and others never stopped caring for her. After learning of Eleni's special ability, Ultimecia has been manipulating sorceresses to eventually get to her. When the gang defeats Adia and restore her back to normal, Ultimecia then hijacks the body of Renoa, who just recently received sorceress powers after Adia transferred them to her upon defeat. But what Ultimecia really wants is to use Renoa to release Sorceress Adele from her galactic space prison, and then possess her to have greater power and more easily reach Eleni. And I mean, I get it if we're just comparing physiques, I'm sorry Renoa, but Adele's the breadwinner. Now at first it seems like a bad idea to let Ultimecia go through with this plan, but resident scientific genius and dude with a fucking floating device attached to his neck, Dr. Odin, figures that as long as Ultimecia lives in the future, there's no way to stop her here in the present. So the plan is to let Ultimecia achieve time compression, if just for a bit, to give Squall and the others the opportunity to enter her lair in the future and defeat her once and for all.
So if you're wondering about Sorceress Adele, Squall manages to kill her almost immediately after she's freed. Womp womp.
So using her powers again, Eleni sends both Renoa and Ultimecia to the past, brings Renoa back to the present to save her, leaving Ultimecia alone in the past, which allows her to achieve time compression, and it's about as trippy as it sounds. This is why you don't trust those Delta 8 CBD gummies at your local gas station, kids. It's just nothing but bad news.
But with time compression somewhat achieved, Squall and the gang are able to enter Ultimacia's castle and take the fight directly to her. And using her special power, she's not only able to knock down your stats and magic, but she's also able to do shit like create a guardian force out of Squall's mind and then become one with it, which by default is named Griever, but you can name him whatever you want. And knowing through osmosis that this battle was in my future, I named Griever Bob, just so that I can see Ultimacia say that she was good at Junction onto Bob. There's always room for a Bob. But even with all these powers, Squall and the power of teamwork and love is able to finally defeat Ultimacia and cause time to decompress. As it turns out, everything we've been doing, everything that's come together, it was all to feed into one giant stable time loop, since before heading back to the present, Squall is the one that ends up inspiring Adia and Sid to create Seed to deal with future sorceresses. Ah, I see. Okay, I understand everything now. Maybe we can also tell Adia to stop mugging it for the camera. She does that shit a lot. It's thriller dancing. Our story ends with everything back to normal. Celebrations are had with one of my favorite renditions of the main theme of Final Fantasy. It's so fucking beautiful in this game, dude. Zell almost chokes to death on a hot dog, with Rinoa and Squall finally sealing the deal on their relationship. And if that plot summary sounded scattered, unfocused, and kind of all over the place, one, that's probably because of me. I'm not going to pretend I'm perfect. Also, if there's one word I can use to describe the story of this game, it's weird. The real focus of the story clearly ain't about trying to stop Ultimacia from doing time bullshit. It's seeing the development of Squall and Rinoa's relationship. Everything else outside of Laguna's own story being merely supportive, secondary, or just straight up forgotten. Shit, if we want to start with the head honcho, for a main villainess, Ultimacia ranks pretty high on the Final Fantasy villains I ended up not giving a shit about. And I get it's more about what she represents to emphasize, to complement the themes of the game, but she herself is... I thought she wasn't very interesting. Despite rocking an absolutely killer design, she was someone I got to see in action first in Dissidia on the PSP. God, that was nearly 20 years ago. I love to see those games get re-released, but I don't know, man. Cool design. I was like, who is she? But playing the game, I find her very appealing, just a means to an end. Squall is introduced as your typical loner, very efficient at what he does, very professional, gets the job done, and then some, but his outer personality is about as smooth as sandpaper. And it's all very much intentional, since it's clear that underneath his cold, try-hard exterior is the heart of a kid who at a young age was sent to an orphanage and lost contact with someone he cared about called Sis, which later turns out to be Eleni. So his reasoning for not getting close to anyone is not so much trying to be the cool guy, but because he doesn't want to re-experience that feeling of abandonment he suffered as a kid. Rinoa, on the other hand, won't have any of that. She's the daughter of a general of the Galbadian army, but despite her privileged upbringing, she still thinks that Galbadia trying to conquer the world is wrong and wants to help others out. Initially trying to lend support to rebel factions in other villages and then joining Squall and the others with their mission to defeat Adia. But she isn't the most experienced fighter out there, so sometimes, a lot of times, she gets into trouble and requires rescuing, but I don't think she quite fits the damsel in distress moniker, because she's plenty capable, has the upper body strength of a god with how long she holds onto this cliff to prevent certain doom during the Galbadian raid, and she has a dog that she can launch like a fucking missile. As early as we're introduced to her, she spends the game trying to crack Squall's stubborn shell, and with her bubbly, if somewhat naive personality, she becomes super persistent about it to an almost annoying degree. But the only reason I don't find it troublesome is because as the player, as someone who's always present with Squall, it's clear he's going through a lot mentally, and his refusal to be more open about it is taking a toll on him. I mean, the whole game, Squall is constantly inner monologuing to himself. Hell, I think he holds the record for having the most inner monologuing of any Final Fantasy protagonist outside of Tidus. Squall's great at what he does, but inside, he's suffering, and he knows he's suffering, but he just can't open up about it, which itself causes social rifts, which only makes him feel worse.
And as someone who deals with chronic depression, who honestly believes that sometimes the best means of combating emotions is just by climbing up and hoping it goes away like a case of hemorrhoids, there's much I relate with Squall. 20 years ago, I would have dismissed Squall as whiny. But no, I genuinely find him fascinating, and a driving force for me as I continued the story was wondering when shit was about to hit the fan so hard that Squall would finally address his problems from within and with his friends.
However, there are a couple of things I find problematic with how the game approaches the Squall and Rinoa dynamic. And I want to make clear now that I do not mind that Squall and Rinoa get together at the end. At first I thought this is pretty forced, like there was a couple of times where I thought, yo, Rinoa, a little personal space here, please, thank you. Let the man breathe. But I think my real problem is just how fast things play out, and enough time isn't given for the relationship to cook. Now, this is partially my fault because I didn't have Renoa in my party most of the time, so I imagine there was a lot of nuances and conversations I missed out on because, well, I wanted the hot teacher and the hot cowboy in my party. I could say hot teacher. Yeah, actually, how old is Keislis? I'll just call her Squall's friend. But another thing is that these two don't get as much time as I wanted because Renoa is constantly out of action. So through the whole third disc, she's in a coma. And while this does get Squall to finally open up and confront his emotions and being less of a prick, the story is almost done when Renoa finally wakes up and these two get some proper alone time. And that whole space sequence with Renoa almost dying as she's sent adrift, with Squall coming to rescue her with reckless abandon, realizing that, yeah, I think I like this girl, complete with the Eyes on Me vocal theme, I thought that was beautiful. But I was also thinking, I don't think this was earned quite yet because I feel we didn't have enough time to properly develop Renoa and what she wants out of life, which is weird because immediately after this bit, Renoa shares with Squall her personal anxieties and fears as she might potentially become a sorceress that everyone might scorn for existing given past history. And I love that development. But we needed this conversation earlier. I don't know when and where, we just needed it earlier. Another problem I have with this is that because the plot feels so hell-bent on making this relationship the central focus, that it comes at the expense of other party members and a more cohesive story. I mean, everyone else in this game, whether they're part of the gang or not, are really just there as supportive pillars and secondary characters, which is not always a bad thing, I want to say that, but I wish they had a little more to them given how integral they are to getting things done. Keistis, or is it Quistis? God, I don't fucking know. She starts out as your instructor, and apparently can't play music well, but I made her boss as fuck with tap dancing, believe you me. And at first there seems to be an attempt at making her and Squall an item, but it's revealed that she sees Squall as more of a little brother to watch over, and after that, her story is basically done. Although I also love that she's just a fucking nerd, being the secret leader of the Triple Triad Squad. That's my kind of RPG character. Let the whole fucking world burn. I don't care. It's time to get our game on. Zell is your typical hot-headed pugilist that packs a mean punch, but he's also pretty good with machines and is smarter than he looks. But the game will insist that he's the punching bag. He always misses the hot dog restaurant lunch hours. No one will shake his hand. He accidentally reveals that students from Galbadia Garden are trying to assassinate the president. He's berated by others, particularly Cypher, who calls him a chicken wuss. Chicken wuss? What in the 4Kids kind of insult is that? What is he, 9? Chicken wuss, what the fuck? Zell is here to punch things and get heated when he's treated like a loser, and I feel he's nothing more than that. At least, compared to everyone else here, he still has a loving connection with his mom, so you know what? Who are the real losers here? The answer is you. Selphie loves trains, and as we later find out, she also loves explosions. I love Selphie, and how quick she is to decide the best course of action is ultraviolence. But outside of those fascinations and her potential relationship with Irvin, I feel she's got nothing else, and the only time we really focus on the character within is when she's observing the remains of her former school grounds after it was nuked from a missile attack. Irvin seems like your standard flirtatious cowboy that tries too hard to be a man's man and swoon the ladies. He still kind of is, make no mistake, but in little time you realize there's more layers to him than that. But I would argue his main purpose, his only purpose, is to reveal one of the biggest twists in the middle of the story. That he, Selphie, Keistis, Zell, Squall, and Cypher all grew up in the same orphanage together, and that Sorceress Adia was once their caretaker, which is why he initially hesitates going through with the assassination attempt he was tasked with completing. He knows who she is and is pretty miffed that the others seem to not remember her or each other. So it turns out everyone here were friends as early as their childhoods, and the only reason they don't remember is because their memories were fucked up because of a side effect of using Guardian Forces too much, which the game does set up as early as the first disc, especially if you go out of your way to read everything. But ultimately, after that reveal, nothing else comes from that. The whole Guardian Forces wiping out memories was just for this bit. This feels a bit contrived. I was already liking these characters before that reveal, so revealing that these guys all grew up in the same orphanage feels like an unneeded attempt at making sure I'm supposed to care about these guys. I already do. We didn't need this. What I wanted more of was Cypher and his two henchmen, Fujin and Raijin. And I was a little shocked at how little screen presence they got for what is clearly supposed to be the counterparts to Squall's merry band of child soldiers. Squall and Cypher both rock gun blades. They go through intense training together, but while Squall's reserved and cold, Cypher is very expressive and quick to anger, passionately yearning to achieve his dreams of, I think, simping to a sorceress. I think that's what he wants to do. He's given plenty to do in the first two discs, but when he falls under the influence of the sorceress, I find him no more of a henchman than his two buddies Fujin and Raijin, who mainly exist to have vocabulary quirks, or in Fujin's case, speaking only in singular, all capitalized words. Is the caps lock key on her keyboard jammed? I like the moment they have towards the end where they try and talk some sense into Cypher when he's fallen off the deep end, and even they realize that, especially when Fujin temporarily drops a single word act and actually speaks in full out sentences. That caught me off guard, but I welcomed it. It was good for a laugh. She spends the whole game uttering single words like rage or liar, and then in the climax of this encounter, she's suddenly like,
Cypher, I do believe the best course of action is to stop being a piss and vinegar cringe baby.
Cypher gets great moments. The torture sequence in the prison is a good bit that helps clarifies what he wants in life. I absolutely love how he manages to split Odin in two in one of the game's best gotcha moments, and I realize in hindsight, him being brainwashed into becoming the sorceress as knight is what he wanted, albeit in a dark, twisted way that's supposed to be a counterpart of Squall becoming Renoa's knight by his own choice. But I think his significance is dropped too soon. I loved seeing him laughing with his friends at the end though. Yeah, he committed war crimes, but look how happy he is. I found the best character to be Laguna, and I know that probably won't shock some. That seems to be the general consensus with folks that played this game, but dude, what a lovable fucking dork. He looks out for his friends, his family, and fights for what he believes in for the sake of others. At first, I wasn't sure what they were going with this guy. Squall and the others pass out on occasion, and suddenly we're in the shoes of this dude who's always getting into some shit. But Laguna's life and purpose is not just a means of giving us additional context so that players know what's going on, but it's also meant to act as a contrast to Squall. In any other game, I'd find Laguna to be quite vanilla. But his more optimistic approach to life and events serve as a beacon of hope and inspiration in a world that otherwise feels like it's on constant edge. Even if things don't always go his way, he tries to look at the glass half full, and because of this, he's earned the love and respect of a lot of people, and for as little screen time they get, I love his two friends Kyros and Ward, even if I find Kyros' decision to dress as Voldo from Soulcalibur to be strange. The fact that because of his commitment to rescuing Eleni when she's taken away, and because of other circumstances out of his control, that he misses the birth of his kid and the passing of his wife is gut-wrenching. He didn't deserve that shit, but sometimes life is like that. But because he managed to stop Sorceress Adele back in the day, he's promoted to being president of Estar. The guy's like, yeah, she sucked. Here, you can be president now. So, he's doing pretty good for himself, but deep down, he'd do anything to see his wife one more time. It's not outright stated, but pretty much confirmed that he's Squall's dad. And this is one thing I'm not entirely sure about. I'm pretty sure he knows that, but did he ever attempt to try and reconnect with Squall, or was his duties as newly elected president stopping him from doing that? I assume the latter, because otherwise, dude, you fucking left your kid in an orphanage and now he's got anxiety. But honestly, it is difficult for me to express my total feelings on every character and story beat, because I feel more than every other Final Fantasy I played for these videos, Final Fantasy VIII is only about the themes, at the expense of trying to have a coherent story that's supposed to supplement it. Frankly, story progression feels all over the place. Sometimes it feels like shit just happens just to get to the next major beat with little time to properly reflect, and sometimes it feels like shit just happens just because. No matter how irrational it may come off. And folks, that surreal, almost dreamlike nature of storytelling permeates through the whole game, to the point where it feels like the story is simply nonsensical, illogical, and just plain weird. Like, why are we leaving everything to a bunch of teenagers, including shit like assassinations? Why did the Balam Garden have a secret landlord that was ripped right out of a Star Wars movie? And why was that quickly dropped? Dude, the whole fucking school can move? What? That's trippy as shit. Are these little dudes we first meet in the prison just supposed to be here? It's just an everyday thing? Oh, it turns out these are just one of many forms these Shumi people can take when they grow up and evolve. Okay, are we gonna explain Norg at all? I'm pretty sure he's from here and he helped finance the school. Nothing? What the hell? How did the guys manage to quickly hide in the broken tank to avoid the missile-based explosion when it looked like they had fucking fractions of a second to do so? How did Squall recover from being impaled with icicles at the end of Disc 1? And why does he just recover like it's nothing? Squall manages to rescue Noah from the abyss, and both are about to run out of air, but it's okay because there just happens to be an abandoned airship that was nearby that's still fully operational, and though it has a small alien infestation, Squall fends them off with no problem. Experiencing this story was almost like a fever dream at points, like it was written by a bunch of kids who grew up in the same orphanage. Actually, yeah, a romance story where teenagers do everything. Every adult is fucking worthless with monsters, magic, outer space travel with little to no consistent adhesion to narrative threads. That sounds like fan fiction I wrote in high school, around the same age as these emotionally repressed chuckle fucks, which either makes Final Fantasy VIII the most brilliantly written RPG ever, or an incoherent mess that tried too fucking hard to tell a simple love story and just wanted an excuse to have a bunch of FMV show off the development team's new budget. I'm of the camp that the story isn't at all the point. It's a character study that puts a lot of emphasis on contrasting themes, and I did enjoy that aspect of the game. Like I said before, I enjoyed the characters enough for it to be a driving force for me to go through what's Otherwise, a basic-ass love story. Now, I don't see myself revisiting it anytime soon, but I did not at all hate my time experiencing this. And I noticed it being so flat-out fucking insane as a drawing point, but if you ask me, Final Fantasy X told this story better, and I'd tell folks to play that first before playing this. But Final Fantasy VIII's story is weird enough to be fascinating on its own merits. But this is assuming you can even get through the game to properly experience it, and this was the main reason why I initially couldn't get down with the game, because of how on the surface it seemed so different. In fact, the one thing I'll say now, before I even get into the nitty-gritty of how this game works, is that if you're thinking of playing Final Fantasy VIII, if you haven't already, and you try and play it like any other old school Final Fantasy around this time, you are in for a rough time. You know what? It's kind of like the original Final Fantasy II. And not in terms of hitting yourself or the stupid back row shit or the
Forward and back, and then forward and back, and then go forward and back, then put 1 foot forward.
It's more like, this is an experimental Final Fantasy that doesn't necessarily play by the standard rules of previous centuries. The first thing I noticed was that I had no equipment, just a weapon. Your weapon is the only thing you can upgrade in this game, which you find out by reading these magazines you either buy in stores or find scattered all over the world, by visiting any junk shop and using the materials listed, which you primarily get from enemy drops, since this game doesn't have any treasure chests. I'm just realizing that as I type this part out in the script. Your weapons can be upgraded to hit harder and look different. Hell, you don't even really need the magazines. If you just know what materials you need because of hindsight or you read a guide, you can still make the weapon upgrade because all that's needed are the materials. But that is it. Your weapon is all you can really change. You have no armor or any accessory slots. So how do you handle or control your stat growth? Well, fighting monsters, getting experience, and leveling up is still a play, and in this game, you're always guaranteed a level just by breaking 1,000 experience points. It never scales up. And while leveling up does result in you hitting harder and making you more durable, this also applies to enemies. Yeah, enemies level up with you in this game. It has a dynamic difficulty curve. So you might be asking, well, wait, then what exactly is the point of fighting monsters if they're just gonna get stronger with me? Wouldn't it be better if I just ran away from everything? And I mean, you can, and in fact you are, once you understand the means of breaking the game. But assuming you're not, or you're not keenly aware, monsters are a source of spells in this game. You may have noticed that on top of having no real equipment to manage, you also don't have standard magic points. Instead, spells in this game are quantifiable items that you can amass a few ways. You can either locate one of the many draw points placed in different parts of towns, dungeons, and even the overworld, and stock the spell to the selected character, or you can use the draw command and siphon spells from enemies. You can either cast the magic then and there, or you can stock it and save them for later. But magic is also how you increase your substats in this game, made possible by the junction system. Now this is where Guardian Forces come into play, or GFs as I'll now refer to them as. As I said before, these are your standard Final Fantasy summons, and there's a whole bunch of them to collect, from the classic fiery Ifrit, the cold as ice Shiva, the water noodle Leviathan, and the boss as fuck Bahamut, to some of the more unique and outlandish creatures like the Minotaur brothers or the gravity master Diablos. Hell, you can even smack enemies with a fucking train. And standalone, these guys don't do much other than hitting your opponent with a flashy attack, same as it ever was. But equipping a GF to a character also allows them to junction the magic spells they have in their inventory into their substats. I'm talking your HP, your strength, physical defense, magical defense, speed, hit ratio, luck, all that shit, even elemental properties and status effects to give you immunities to certain debuffs, or giving your attacks an elemental edge for extra damage. When you have one equipped, GFs earn experience like you do. Leveling up makes them stronger, but the real purpose of equipping them is unlocking more of their innate abilities to potentially learn, which you get by accumulating ability points that's earned from battles. Abilities can range from a basic increase to substats, or allowing you to equip more abilities to really get the numbers going. Like there's a couple of GFs or items you can give to your GF that gives you shit like ability ×4, and I tell you, that just makes me moist. But some abilities could be something unique to that specific GF, like Diablos' Encounter None, which turns off random battles, or the Tomberry's Call Shop, which allows you to buy items from any of the game's stores just from the menu, no matter where you're at. Really nifty, that ability. I definitely got my use out of that one, especially in the 4th disc. The most common perk is the ability to junction magic to certain stats, and this is the real bread and butter to increasing everyone's strength, magic power, and durability. The more of a particular magic spell you have stocked, the larger the stat bonus will be when you junction it to that stat, and the stronger the spell, the stronger the junction stat. At first, you might be junctioning something like water to your strength to hit a little harder, but later you'll be replacing it with stuff like tornado or flare because they're stronger magic, and stronger magic means stronger gains. Okay, junctioning is simple enough, and honestly, giving us so much control over all these substats is quite liberating, if a little overwhelming, and sure enough, when I first played this game, it was overwhelming. This was a little more intimidating than the materia system in 7. You know, that game gave you so many possible combinations to do some pretty crazy shit. But characters in that game still lean towards specific roles because of their inherent substats. But Final Fantasy VIII was giving me direct control of that, so God, who do I make do what? It was a little much to process, but the thing that was really killing me was gathering spells to properly junction into my stats in the first place. Draw points only give you so many spells at a given time, and even then it's just one type of spell. These weren't things you learned, they weren't something you bought in shops. No, if I didn't get them from draw points, I figured, oh shit, that means I gotta draw them from enemies. And this is what my first few attempts at this game looked like. Now imagine that, but constantly, for different spells, for different junctions, for different stats, for your entire party. Mind-numbing. This wasn't your average everyday grind. This was repetitious to a degree I've never experienced before, and I hated it. Why, how the fuck did they think this was a good idea? I mean, enemies leveling up with me was one thing, but was this really the only way I could get magic in this game? And I needed that magic to make my stats worth a damn? Fuck that, no thanks. And that was always my go-to critique of Final Fantasy VIII growing up. It was a tedious bore. But then, years later, I learned the key to making it all superfluous was the card game that Final Fantasy VIII introduces, Triple Triad. I'm not going to go too into it, but Triple Triad's a card game you can play with other NPCs. And you can challenge opponents at the most inappropriate times too. Ultimation's about to initiate Luna Cry? That'll be fine. Let's play some fucking cards. I didn't think much of this at first. I already had Final Fantasy IX under my belt when I first played this, so I just thought, oh, this is the game's Tetramaster. And I didn't really think much of that game, but I'll save that for the 9 video. But just as a heads up, Triple Triad is much better than Tetramaster, but originally I didn't really see the appeal other than just adding cards to my collection. But then I learned that one of the first GFs you get, Quetzalcoatl, and I'm serious, all you gotta do is check your school desk in the opening minutes of the game and the Thunderbird snaky thing is yours. But one of the first abilities you can have them learn is Card Mod, which allows you to convert your Triple Triad cards into crafting items, and then with other GF abilities that lets you refine those items into other things, you can convert those items into a shitload, and I mean a shitload of spells that you can then junction to your stats at a rate much, much faster, easier, and more consistent than Draw-A-Palooza 99. And because you can equip multiple GFs to a single character, basically allowing you to junction magic to every stat without having to grind for those specific junctions from an individual GF, this means that with just a little patience and know-how, you can make your party statistical juggernauts just by playing the fucking card game. Normally, when you win or lose a game of Triple Triad, the prize or cost is one card. But if you manage to win a game with the trade rule set to all, which is very easy to set up when you know who to talk to, I live to serve my queen. The all rule lets you win the entire hand your opponent played against you, which consequently also means if you're not careful, you can lose your entire hand of rare cards to the opponent. And I'm not saying that's what happened to me. No, I'm just resetting because fuck you. With proper setup, you can easily amass a shitload of cards as early as the opening area of the game because Balamb Garden is swarming with a bunch of students who love to play Triple Triad. And with the right cards at your disposal, you can refine those into incredibly powerful spells that you're normally not supposed to have this early in the game, giving you such a substantial growth in your stats that, folks, I shit you not, that statistical advantage carries you through the rest of the fucking game. Doubly so if you take the time to make Squall's ultimate weapon, the Lionheart, as early as the first disc, which is not at all hard to do. Shit, you might even have enough materials to make other incredibly strong weapons for the other party members too, just by happenstance. With just a few sessions of Triple Triad, my characters, Squall especially, were basically indestructible. I was hitting foes with absurd damage, enemy attacks did next to nothing to me, and with how easily it was to manipulate limit breaks in this game, bosses were a non-issue. Yes, limit breaks are back from 7, allowing characters to dish out a huge amount of pain with their personal flair. But I guess in a throwback to Final Fantasy VI, they're normally only available when you're in critical health, and it doesn't always pop up once it's your turn. But here's the thing, an easy solution to this is just to spam the character switch button, because eventually you'll get the limit break prompt and then you're golden. There's even a spell in this game called Aura that instantly gives you limit break regardless of your health, and that's not a difficult spell to get. Most of my battles in Final Fantasy VIII, when I wasn't just smacking things with my gunblade, was spamming limit breaks. Zell with his flurry of martial arts, Irvin with the greatest special of all time, Gun. Renoa with animal abuse, Keistis with a great selection of blue magic, not as broken as the enemy skill materia in 7, but it's about on par with blue magic from Final Fantasy V. Debilitate foes with her gingivitis, or give them a fucking seizure with Degenerator. Seriously, that spell hurt my eyes, so watch out for that. I had to lower the opacity of this just to make sure I wasn't hurting myself. I'm gonna be real, I forgot what Selphie did, but I read that she has a limit break that kills anything in one hit, including bosses. Holy shit. But when you just don't give a fuck, Squall is here with his flashy ass sword combos. Bonus points if you get his Lionheart finisher, because it's another chain of hits after you already did a large chain of hits. Simmer down, Squall, you fucking show off. You'd think I was using a game shark with how many limit breaks I was using, or at least the boosters, but it was all through the means given to me in the game, and a part of me believes this was how the game was always meant to be played.
ファイナルファンタジー8をまだプレイしてない方が、初めてやる他の手段でカードを使った方法で
Everyone I talk to that plays this game tells me they do the same exact shit. They farm triple triad for a bit to get the cards and items needed to junction a shitload of spells into their stats, so then they can easily make mincemeat out of enemies, all without having to kill anything, which, because of the game's dynamic leveling, puts you at a major advantage over every regular enemy and every boss. The game encourages you to keep your levels low. You don't earn money from fights in this game. It's given to you just by traveling. And if you increase your seed rank by taking these quizzes accessible from the fucking menu, which you can easily pass just by looking the answers up online. Cheater! You're going to be swimming in so much guild that you'll depress yourself realizing it ain't real money. Mandatory battles like boss fights don't give you any experience, just ability points for your GF. You can get Diablos' zero encounter ability very early on, assuming you're not just using the remaster's no encounter feature. When you don't just want to run away from encounters, you can do something like using the card ability to let you transform enemies into triple triad cards, which still nets you ability points for your GF and a new card that you can refine into spells, but more importantly, you get no experience points from doing this, meaning you can keep your levels low and your spell count up. I actively felt like shit whenever I gained experience points in this, truly. This is Toby Fox's vision. But no, it's because I knew the more I leveled up, the less of an advantage I was giving myself. There's an optional dungeon later, the Deep Sea Research Facility. It's where you can fight one of the game's optional bosses, the Ultimate Weapon. But the path to this guy is filled with a lot of mandatory encounters, which sadly give experience points when you win. And man, that felt terrible. So I ended up resetting the game and just making sure I turned everything to cards so that I can make my time with Ultimate Weapon a walk in the park. Hell, even Omega Weapon, the game's super boss, didn't stand much of a chance because on top of keeping levels low and using stuff like Aura to use limit breaks all the time, if you play enough triple triad to get something like the Gilgamesh card, you can convert that card into Holy Wars, that's a name. This gives the whole party complete invincibility for several turns. What the fuck, man? That's so crazy. And admittedly, I did feel a little dirty fighting him like this, but then I looked at his HP value and said, oh no, fuck him and fuck his vagina mouth. Now, obviously, you'll still need to occasionally draw from enemies anyway. You might find a better replacement for junctioning better stats on a whim, or a spell that you simply didn't have access to until this point. And there's a lot of GFs in this game you can only obtain by drawing them out from certain bosses. So, make sure you still have the draw command on standby, and make sure you're not missing out on a potential GF summon, because otherwise you have to wait until endgame to get another shot at it. And if you're playing the remaster like I did, stocking up on spells via drawing is honestly not that terrible now thanks to the 3x speed feature. Oh my god. I know I touched upon this in earlier reviews, but 3x speed really is the unsung hero of these re-releases, because anything that cuts down on grinding time that doesn't just involve activating cheats or boosters is a fucking life changer. And rest assured, I was using this feature liberally, both in and out of combat. But I also realize when you get down to it, you're really just trading one form of grinding for another. If you're not farming spells from enemies or draw points, you're playing a lot of triple triad to get the items you need to make a lot of spells at once. And if you don't like triple triad, or don't find the idea of playing it a whole bunch to get what you need to be stimulating, I don't know what to tell you. Now for me, I love Triple Triad. And I didn't think much of it originally, but it was brought back for Final Fantasy XIV, and those that know me know I played that game too fucking much, and know that I can't get enough of this fucking game. I make it a thing to keep up to date with new card releases every patch. I challenge all the new opponents when they're brought in, and I played so much of it that I have the card mount, which I call Jam on Toast. And it's legit one of my favorite mounts in the game, and I plan on doing it all over again with my Romani character. You have no idea what you're in for, little man. However, I find Final Fantasy VIII a hard sell if you're not into that because of how everything is so tied into the junction system and draw mechanics. Playing the game any other way is boring to me. Fuck, in my earliest battles, I was still trying to approach encounters with some degree of strategy. I would use scan to see an enemy's weakness, and if I saw that I had a proper spell or status magic, I'd use it, but then I realized, wait, shit, if I keep using spells, that's less of them I have junction to my stats, meaning I'm only making myself weaker by doing this. And I know it's not that difficult to replenish some of these spells, but the real good ones, the ones that give you the best junction bonuses, no, I refuse to use them for combat, which only fed into my need to just limit break everything. And limit breaks are like the one thing that gives everyone some manner of personality. I know there's this compatibility mechanic where characters have different affinities for certain GFs, but honestly, I'd argue that's completely negligible because I managed through the game just fine without thinking about it for a second. Because I wasn't down with the idea of using those spells I grinded so much just to stock for stat gains. How else could I define these characters outside of regular attacks, whatever GF they had equipped, or limit breaks? I honestly don't know, and if more of the dedicated 8 players would like to elaborate on like how characters are inherently in tune to certain roles, I would love to hear that because I just didn't see it. My adventure through Final Fantasy VIII became very routine very quickly. I'm finally clicking with the game after years of attempts, but now that I've actually finished the game, okay, I wouldn't call it a one and done, but I'm really in no rush to replay this. And it isn't just because of the combat system and all that. No, I want to stress that. To be honest, I found the world of Final Fantasy VIII to be... it's kind of hard to put into words. First off, the remaster did no favors to the overall design. It is hideous. You can see the texture tiling on mountains and forest areas. The colors are so drab, and this isn't so much a remaster issue, but my god, the camera is so fucking close to Squall that I can barely see where I'm going. And this 3D map right here, it didn't tell me shit. I just used the standard one, but hot damn, look at how much space this thing is taking up. When the Balam Garden eventually gains the ability to fly, I'm in pain. I can't see anything, and the controls for this thing feel so stiff. Now this becomes less of a hassle when you get the Ragnarok, which no shit, I think might be one of my favorite airships in the series now after I finally seen it in action for myself. But I think we needed this baby earlier because traveling across the world in this fat ass building was more trouble than it's worth. Not for nothing though, the game's certainly not lacking in optional content in and out of the world map, and in a way I find it complements the game's already surreal and bizarre nature. I mean, it's not exploding with content, but along your travels you might run into an honest to god UFO and feed this little poo-poo guy a shitload of elixirs. You might feel cozy farming these cactuars for ability points now until you're suddenly fighting against a jumbo one. Oh, that mustache is adorable. Asshole. Can't say I enjoyed the Chocobo stuff this time. There's nothing as involved as Chocobo breeding this go around. Honestly, I'm still not sure how this Chocobo hunting game even works. I tried for a while until I just gave up and let the kid do the work for me. I had plenty of money, why not? But all this for a Chocobo traveling that's already obsolete because you have the garden to take you where you need to go. I know there's an achievement and Triple Triad card attached to this, and if you're playing the Japanese version on PlayStation 1, I believe there's a side quest you can do utilizing the Pocket Station. That was Japan only. And seeing as I don't have access to that, the Chocobo stuff in this game I just ignored. I'll make up for that in the next game though, believe me I will. Every major continent has several places of intrigue, like the Tomb of the Unknown King, where you can get the brothers GF and watch this ghost dance. The Central Ruins, where you can recruit Odin if you manage to beat him out of the time limit. It's a really weird fight too. He doesn't attack you at all like in Final Fantasy IV, but also like don't let the time run out. But you still have like 8 minutes to kill him as opposed to 1, so my ass is like, all right, I'll get the bendy straw and start sucking, I guess. Just a heads up on Odin though, he's not like the other GFs you get. You don't equip him to anyone. Instead, he'll randomly show up when a battle starts to deliver a one-hit kill. And while that's great, it's funny when it happens on something like the Ruby Dragon fight that Laguna fights alone. If you're trying to farm spells, cards, or ability points while keeping levels low, you don't want this to happen because Odin kills everything and you get experience points for it. Dick move, Odin. I'm glad Cypher slices you in half. But then Gilgamesh makes his return from Final Fantasy V to take his place. Gilgamesh, I love you, but why? The ruins are also where you can get the Tomberry King GF. God, this one sucked to get. It's nothing complicated. You just farm Tomberries until he shows up, but that's as exciting as farming Tomberries. Adorable little shit, though. Doink! There's a set of islands in the overworld called the islands closest to heaven and hell that contain the strongest hitting monsters in the game, but also have some of the best spells that you're just free to draw from. I love high risk, high reward places like this because when you play your cards right, you feel like a god. Though it may look like I'm getting my shit pushed in by this marble here, I assure you I'm in control. The story of the game will take you to many bustling locales with plenty of locals to play card games with, chat, or play card games with. From your standard small towns to gargantuan cities, and I want to emphasize gargantuan because goddamn some of these places are just too damn big and confusing to navigate. Again, liberal use of that 3x speed feature, or maybe my patience is just running thin as I'm getting older. But I swear the default running speed didn't exactly feel like running speed, if you feel me. And it just ain't the size. Sometimes I struggle just trying to find the exit to some of these screens, which is in part thanks to the blurry backgrounds. The remaster really only remastered the character models and user interface, and they look fine, great even. But they did diddly dick with the backgrounds, and on higher resolutions combined with some interesting angles chosen for these pre-rendered backgrounds, it can be hard to distinguish where you can and cannot go. You know, Final Fantasy VII had a solution to this, those green and red markers that told you of exits and other places of interest. This game doesn't have those. Why not? The remaster also doesn't have proper analog support. You can use the analog stick to move, but you're still locked to 8 directions as if you're using the D-pad. This isn't bad for basic traveling, but when you're just trying to talk to motherfuckers, positioning yourself to have a chat can be very finicky and imprecise. I also think it's because of this that inputting that secret code to reach Odin is so damn loose. You slightly tap the analog stick and the game acts as if you press the button like 3 to 4 times in a row. What the fuck? Game's beautiful, though. I know I just dogged in the backgrounds. I can't deny that Final Fantasy VIII has a cool aesthetic that feels like a logical evolution of VII's more contemporary setting. Characters are realistically proportioned. You can actually see your teammates travel by your side. What the fuck is this, Lufia and the Fortress of Doom? What a ripoff! And in terms of the characters' designs, I like everyone here. Not as anime as VII, definitely, and certainly not as diverse. I mean, this cast is whiter than fucking Wonder Bread. But I still enjoy how homely everyone looks and feels in this. For every locale brimming with locomotives or regular-ass cars, there's moving school facilities or more fantastical set pieces like Lunatic Pandora or Ultimatia's Castle. There's outer space areas, which reminded me heavily of Cowboy Bebop. I just wish traveling in space wasn't so fucking slow. I have to ask PlayStation 1 players, like, on genuine hardware, like, how the fuck were you supposed to get through this slow-ass sequence without throwing your controller on the monitor? Can I at least put like a rocket up my ass? Holy shit, it's so slow. If you're more in tune with the medieval locales of previous games, you might find 8's world more generic, but I liked it. It's just, again, my problems are more about traveling in these places and the overworld being so ugly. One thing's for sure, the soundtrack was something I've been enjoying for years. And while I'm glad to finally have proper context with some of my favorite tunes like Fisherman's Horizon and Eyes on Me, I feel I didn't need to play the game to appreciate that music. You ever had a game like that, one that you barely played, but you just, like listening to the music? I'd love to hear what you guys have to share about that. Now, I didn't enjoy the soundtrack as much as VII if we're just sticking with the PS1 games for now, but a part of what stuck out to me was how whimsical and fun some compositions were. Laguna, I think, getting some of the goofiest tracks, but I also love tracks like, Residence when you're cleaning out the Ragnarok of those aliens. The battle themes, they're great. The standout being the final boss gauntlet. You got Legendary Beasts, Maybe I'm a Lion. Maybe I'm a Lion is so fucking good, though. What a raw, primal feeling composition. I don't want to risk any copyright claims, especially as I go into the more modern Final Fantasies, so all I can say is look up the music for yourself. Square has a whole channel dedicated to music, so you're best going off there. My favorite track, though, Shuffler Boogie, the Triple Triad theme. Why? You tell me. I want to say I can recommend Final Fantasy VIII. Yes, it's weird. Yes, the plot is kind of insane, especially from Disc 2 onwards. Yes, it's easy to break. Yes, the only way I think you can have fun is by breaking it. But I also didn't hate my time with it. There are much better Final Fantasies with much better stories, but for a game they were clearly experimenting with, I can easily say this is the most successful attempt at experimentation compared to the other time they tried changing out the formula. Well, formula was the second game. Was there even a formula? Anyway, this is helped by using the remaster's speed up features and all that to make grinding less of a chore. But you know what? Assuming you don't mind how slow it might be, I think playing the original on PlayStation 1 isn't the worst thing in the world, because again, I don't think the remaster did any favors for the graphics outside of the character models. When I loaded up the demo again after finishing this game, maybe a part of it was just the nostalgia goggles, but I thought to myself, holy shit, the game looks much better on the PlayStation 1. Yeah, the models are obviously lower res and jaggy, but I think like the whole picture just looks richer in harmony. I don't know, but Final Fantasy VIII is often labeled as a black sheep, and I can see why. but I also think it doesn't hurt much to try it for yourself, but only if you approach it through means of utterly destroying the fucking thing. Otherwise, I don't think it's a very good Final Fantasy. Again, I probably won't replay it anytime soon, but I still think it's worth a cautious recommend. Doubly so if you love power fantasies where you beat the shit out of enemies with flashy attacks. Other than that, I don't think you're missing a blockbuster from the 90s, and this train minigame sucks dick. I just realized I got this far without talking about it, so my apologies for the sudden shift, but this one's so... Yeah, fuck it, let's just wrap it up.
Okay, but seriously, shit. These videos are just gonna get longer and longer. Like, what's the video length gonna be by the time I get to like 12 or 13, 14? That is not gonna be a single video. That's gonna be multiple videos. I think I shared that before, but that is gonna be multiple videos. But my God. Well, I mean, we keep this train running because the next Final Fantasy I'll be looking at is Final Fantasy IX. That is the last PlayStation 1 entry before they make the generational shift. And I'm just going to say now that will not be the next video because I need time to properly make that video because I got a feeling, caught a hunch, that video is going to be a little longer than this one. But I do appreciate your time and company. I will try to keep you occupied in the meantime with a few smaller videos concerning other things I want to look at for the time. Probably the most out of those is that new Astrobot game that came out for the PlayStation 5, because I looked at Playroom a couple of years ago. I really liked it. And now, apparently from what I'm understanding, this is right up my alley. But I'll find out for sure the next time I decide to make a much smaller versus video. But we're not properly finished yet until I get some patron shoutouts done and over with. And if you would like to be a part of this list where you see your name on the wherever it is, you can go to my Patreon at patreon.com/Somecallmejohnny. We're getting ready for some SGB integration as well. And I hope you guys look forward to what we have in store. But anyway, let us continue on where I left off. All right, so continuing where I left off with more $10 patrons over at my Patreon: Joshua Shaper, Trios, the Bone Father of Law, Zachary Gray, Scout, Soul, RHKJ, Number 9 Tro, Josiah Andrews, Brave Soon 7, The Kenyan Squad, Random Thought JB, Zany, Romy Camillo, Craig 13, Yman 343, Jordan 642, Smiling Dread 04, Devin Ellis, Mr. Kryptonite, Mr. Rainbow Tie, Michael Kelly, Rando the Game Guy, Heroes Rise Up, General Williams, Mr. Chaos, Last Legend, Jubris, Hunter Bear 97, Ora Money, Anton, Austin, Snow Lala, Daniel Joseph Davies, the animation analyst, Breakfast and Stuff, Zeno Z. Breakfast sounds really fucking good right now. Zeno ZX, Sil Jeff, Murgle Merlinton, CJ the Nerd King, Mediocre Panda, Faded, Squishy Chain 112, Crimson DX, Tyler Nocturne, Matt Hop, Kari Renee Rose, Glasvaska, KJR, whatever, Jean Charles, or is it Jean Charles, Mental Meta Dale, Shiny Umbreon, Daniel Holmes, Alan 501, David Perez, Metal J Rock 2299, Jack Clark, Carbon Eden, Mike Hawk, Obsidian Dynamite, Gate 653, Samal, Fox Bateman, Jordan Cullen, Alex James, Mr. Spaghetti, Naruto Plays, Gwen, Last Crow Larson, Dibby, Michael Alemo, Chris Gardner, Gabriel Schutz, Sifra Blaze Yeager, Steve Hedge, Christopher Karasi, Buscore, was it Buscore? Yeah, David Sheltrin, Jonathan Youngs, Ace Jetstream, Connor Shea, Lance Akira, Jodo Lad 64, Nefarious, Dobie 2180, Gabriel Davila, Chilled Blade, Dakota Smith, Ryan Wilder, King Arthur, John Luivano, Bad Guy Not Fun Guy, Griff, Zendaus, Subrainer, Aeon 3, Veil 4, Geno Sauce, Colada, Quanner, J Wolf, Skull _Man, Josh Gourmet, Jojo Harder, Tucker, Underlinde, Dat Boy, Powerful One, David Alicia, Myzox, Elijah, Ian, Frostfang, James Acosta, Exo Bear, Vangel Jurgo, Benji Bear Pup, your boy Beowulf, Outlook, Carradine, Barry Aldridge, Coke Milk, Nerdzilla, Mevins 2001, Liam Samuel Bull, Jerf Rockstar, M450NF0XX, Mason Fox, I think that's how you're supposed to pronounce that name. And finally for today, Cyrus Dave Vania. All this and more at the end of the next video. I'm building up fucking a whole bunch of spit in my mouth trying to run all these damn names in a row. But yeah, I'll continue with the patron shouts at the end of the next video. As always, thank you all for tuning in. If you sat through this entire thing, my salute and salutations to you all, because man, that should make a sleeping channel. Well, have a good night, everybody. Take care of yourselves and each other. Yeah. Have a good night, everybody.